I bet you thought I'd given up doing video reviews of books. I don't know whether you thought that would be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's not a thing. I just didn't do any over the summer. I was reading a lot, but I was kind of getting behind on vlogs and stuff, so I thought I'm just going to do a big one at the end of the summer, try to keep it as short as possible, but review the books I read over the summer. And of course, as always, they're reviewed in a lot more detail on Compulsive Overreader, my book review blog. So I've decided to call this summer book review the hard and the easy, because my summer books seem to be divided between those that for one reason or another were kind of difficult to get through. Not always ones that weren't good. Some of them were great, but they just took me a while or took a lot of energy or focus to read. And then others that I just kind of ripped through quickly and thoroughly enjoyed. Or sometimes ripped through quickly and yeah, they were okay. Anyway, summer book review, the hard and the easy. First of all, let's start with the book that was the main reason why there was any hard reading this summer. Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. This is this massive 1,000+ page modern classic published in 1996 by the now late David Foster Wallace. Many people adore this book, swear by it. It is a tough read. There's a lot of different literary styles going on. It's not a book that hands anything to you. It's rewarding in its own way, but if you're going to dig into it, be prepared for a long and challenging read, and be prepared to not have all your questions resolved at the end. That's all I'm going to say about this. There's a much longer review on my website. This one, also kind of a harder book, only peripherally counts as a summer of 2013 book. I actually started reading it last summer as my beach book, because I'm always looking for a book to take to the beach that's paperback. I don't mind getting it damp or getting some sand between the pages, and it's also not so engrossing that I'm going to rip through it. I can just dip back into it. So that's what I did last summer, and at the end of the summer I still hadn't read it all the way through. I found it a little slow going. Robert Massey's biography of Peter the Great, I didn't find it as fast moving as his biography of Catherine the Great, which I read last winter and enjoyed a lot better. This one was good. Certainly if you want to know something about the great Russian monarch, it is kind of the definitive biography. However, there were definitely places where I got bogged down. Two books that fall into the hard to read category because they were beautifully written, enjoyable to read, but really difficult subject matter. Leslie Ann Ryan's Braco, about the war in the former Yugoslavia, and Khaled Hosseini, another novel set in Afghanistan, and The Mountains Echoed, my favorite of his books so far. Another book that I guess sort of fell under the hard category, although it wasn't really that difficult, but, you know, a little bit of a dry read because it was history, but a brief history of Seventh-day Adventists, which I was reading for a leadership training thing I'm doing at church, but very, very good, succinct history by George R. Knight, a writer who I always appreciate. At one point when I was getting really bogged down with, well, particularly Infinite Jest and whatever the classic I was reading at the time, anyway, I was pretty overwhelmed with the heavy reading, and I wanted something light and something that was going to be a quick, easy read that I could finish and enjoy. So I started turning to my kids for some of their young adult novels. I read the two John Green novels that I hadn't yet read, An Abundance of Catherines and Paper Towns, both of which both Chris and Emma love. I also picked up two of Emma's favorites, Stephanie Perkins' book Anna and the French Kiss and the sequel Lola and the Boy Next Door, but I'm going to turn the young adult books over to the experts for a review.
Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. I really enjoyed this book. I've read it many, many times since finishing it for the first time. It has a very fresh take on a lot of very popular romantic plot lines, and I really enjoyed it. Stephanie Perkins' other novel, Lola and the Boy Next Door, sort of a sequel almost to Anna and the French Kiss. It had a few of the same characters, but focused on a different main character. Just like the other one, I have read this over and over, and it never gets boring. It has a lot of plot twists, but not cliche ones, and it's definitely worth a read.
After I read The Fault in Our Stars, which was the book that introduced me to John Green, basically, I went out and picked up all his other novels. I believe I read this one first, and I quite enjoyed it. It's a bit of an odd format for a book because almost every page has footnotes, but it is quite an interesting format, and there's a lot of there is quite a lot of graphs and stuff. But I do like it. It's a very interesting and funny book, and I think it's a really creative and unique way to write one. When I first read Paper Towns, I kind of read it, I think, a bit too fast. I kind of whipped through it, and for that reason, I didn't get a lot of the stuff in it initially. But when I reread it again a few months later, I took my time with it and just realized how really awesomely funny and really kind of strange this book is. But I do really love this book quite a lot, and I do love both of them.
One comment about those young adult novels, in all of them the characters are like 17, 18 years old in their last year of high school, but the books tend to be read by younger kids like mine, and there is kind of a realistic assumption there that drinking and having sex are things that older teens are going to do. It's not necessarily always viewed positively, but it's certainly part of the story. So, if your kids are going to be reading these books, or any books sort of, with older teen characters and these kind of things going on in them, talk with them about it. Don't just give your kids books to read. Read the books they read and talk with them about what they're reading. Some novels were just great, interesting reads without a whole lot of, I guess, heavy stuff to them. Susan Rebecca White, A Place at the Table. That was very enjoyable. Charlie Lovett, The Bookman's Tale is another one of those that I like to call the adventures in research type of novel. Meg Wolitzer, The Interestings, lives up to his name. It was interesting. And really thoroughly enjoyed The Universe versus Alex Wood. Strongly recommend this one. Historical fiction is usually a pretty easy read for me, and three favorites that I read this summer in ascending order of how much I enjoyed them. The latest Philippa Gregory about the Wars of the Roses, The White Princess, focusing on Elizabeth of York. Sarah Dunham, Blood and Beauty, about the Borgias, fascinating, really loved it. And my favorite historical fiction of the summer, Kathy Buchanan, The Painted Girls, set in 19th century Paris, about a girl who was one of Edgar Degas' models. Great book. Another one by a Newfoundland writer, Michelle Butler Hallett, Deluded Your Sailors, both a modern and a historical story, really interesting. Some parts of it didn't work as well for me as I hoped they would, but well worth reading. Another really enjoyable book by an Atlantic Canadian author, Riel Nason, The Town That Drowned, coming-of-age story set in New Brunswick. I think this one works equally well as an adult or a young adult novel. Also had a few books I read as an ebook that I couldn't get hold of hard copies to show you, and my ebook is upstairs charging at the moment, so I'm just going to tell you about them. Look Away by Wilton Barnhart, a book I was looking forward to so much. It is the saga of a dysfunctional Southern family. Good in its way, but given how much I loved Wilton Barnhart's first two books and how long I've waited for a new one, I was somewhat disappointed. More details in my full-length review. I read a couple of things by Michael Palin. I read Michael Palin's diaries for the 1970s. It's called The Python Years. Looks back on the years of the Monty Python TV show and the making of Holy Grail and Life of Brian. Very informative, especially to see the long-term perspective. I also read Michael Palin's Around the World in 80 Days, which I've seen the DVD series of, and it was, as always, interesting to get the backstory behind it. Palin's a very entertaining travel writer. My first classic of the summer, Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway. Tried to read Virginia Woolf before, really couldn't get into the stream of consciousness thing, but it worked a bit better this time, and I did enjoy this one. I also started another classic, a very, very long book that has been sort of my nemesis. I've had 3 or 4 shots at reading it over the years. This time I am going to get through it, but probably not till the end of September, so I will review that one at the end of this month. As for poetry, I haven't given up on poetry, but I have kind of slowed down it over the summer. I am still dipping into the same collection that I was reading back in May, which is the Breakwater Book of Contemporary Newfoundland Poetry. And I've been reading some of the different poets collected in here. Al Pittman, Michael Crummey, Mary Dalton, Tom Daw, Carmelita McGraw. My goal is to finish this collection by the end of September, but I am kind of taking my time with it. So, reviewing all the books I read this summer, the hard and the easy, turned out to be quite the epic production, and because of that, I'm posting this instead of a Writing Wednesday this week. Next Wednesday I'll be back with another video about writing. So I have caught up on all my book review giveaways except for April. The April winner, Books and Purse, I haven't managed to get in touch with her to get her address, so if you're watching this, Books and Purse, please email me so I can send you the book that you won. And as for everyone else, if you will share, retweet, like, favorite, comment, or do anything to make sure more people see these book reviews, I will put your name in for a drawing of one of the books I read this summer. And I'm looking forward to a great fall of reading, and I hope you are too.